Hello, everyone. Today's pre-application webinar for the OVC Fiscal Year 2025 Integrated Services for Minor Victims of Human Trafficking Notice of Funding Opportunity will be presented by OVC Grant Management Specialists Lindsay Waldrop and Denisa Medina, and will provide an overview of one of their available grants. Thank you for watching. Now let's turn things over to Lindsay and Denisa.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. This pre-application webinar is for the FY25 Integrated Services for Minor Victims of Human Trafficking Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO. My name is Lindsay Waldrop, and I am joined today by my colleague, Denisa Medina. In this recorded webinar, we will provide an overview of the Office of Justice programs, talk about OVC's mission, and the NOFO, including the funding opportunity focus, eligibility, and required documents. Then we will talk about the application process and resources. It will be helpful if you are following along with the NOFO and taking notes to help when you are submitting your application by the deadline. The Office of Justice Programs provides grant funding, training, research, and statistics to the criminal justice community. There are 6 component offices within the Office of Justice Programs, of which OVC is one. The Office for Crime administers the crime victim funding in addition to the Trafficking Victims Protection Act funding. The Crime Victims Fund is financed by fines and penalties from convictions in federal cases and not from taxpayer dollars. This funding supports formula programs to states, territories, and tribes, as well as many OVC discretionary grant programs for victims of crime. I'm now going to hand this section over to Denisa to provide an overview of the Notice of Funding Opportunity.
Thank you, Lindsay. Funding opportunity details. Notice the NOFO title, OVC FY25 Integrated Services for Minor Victims of Human Trafficking. The funding opportunity number, funding opportunity release date, which was December 30th, 2025, the grants.gov deadline, February 24th, 2026, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. The Just Grants deadline is March 3rd, 2026, 8:59 p.m. Eastern Time. The anticipated start date of your program will be July 1st, 2026. There'll be a performance duration period of 36 months. A NOFO type is competitive, and you'll notice the URL and the pre-application video links. Program description. To address the safety, security, and healing of minor victims of sex and labor trafficking, services should be tailored to their specific needs. These young victims are often involved in the child welfare and juvenile justice system and may have been victimized in multiple ways, both before and during the time they were trafficked. Organizations funded under this program are expected to propose programs adapted to the developmental stages of children and youth. Eligibility for services under this grant are limited to victims who were trafficked and began receiving services while under age 18. However, receipt of services can extend beyond the age of 18 as needed. Services also extend to the victim's eligible family members, a minor victim's children, and or supportive non-offending parents or caregivers. In these services impact the minor safety, security, and healing. Efforts to refer family members to other free and low-cost services prior to the use of OVC funds must be documented. This information can be found on page 9 of the NOFO. Eligibility. Each category of funding has different eligibility requirements. These are detailed in the NOFO starting on page 7. Please be sure to confirm that your entity is eligible to apply in your desired application category. The goal of the program is to support minor victims of human trafficking by improving the quality and accessibility of services delivered by funding national, state, and local victim service organizations. Program objectives. There are 3 program objectives. Objective 1, increase the availability, type, and quality of programs available to serve minor victims of sex and labor trafficking. Objective 2, train individuals to respond to minor victims of sex and labor trafficking. Objective 3, develop protocols and procedures as needed to address the sex and labor trafficking of minors. Funding priorities. Applicants seeking priority consideration should specify in the proposal narrative and in the budget detail form, if applicable, which of the following goals the project is intended to advance and how it will do so. Note, addressing these priority areas is one of many factors that OJP considers in making funding decisions. Receiving priority consideration for one or more priority areas does not guarantee a funded award. Performance measures. Applicants can visit OJP's performance measurement page at ojp.gov/performance for more information on performance measurement activities. Unallowable use of funds. The activities listed here are out of the program scope and will not be funded. Please be sure to review this guidance carefully as you prepare your application. Additionally, as you prepare your application, be sure to refer to budget detail form for further information on allowable and unallowable costs that may inform the development of your program design. Funding instrument. Under this program, awards will be made as grants. See the Administrative, National Policy, and Other Legal Requirements section of the OJP Grant Application Resource Guide for more information. Cost sharing match requirements. This NOFO requires a 25% match based on the total project cost. Federal funds awarded under this NOFO may not cover more than 75% of the total cost of the project being funded. Match means the portion of the project costs not paid by federal funds or contributions, i.e. staff time not charged to the federal share of the budget, supplies provided by the recipient. Items provided as part of the match must support the fulfillment of proposed activities, be allowable costs under the funding opportunity, and have documentation of their value. The match may not be used for and may not consist of costs that are unallowable for this funding opportunity. Recipients must satisfy this match requirement with cash and/or in-kind contributions. In-kind contributions may be in the form of services, supplies, real property, for example, office space and/or equipment. Back to you, Lindsay, to provide information on application content.
Thank you, Denitza. To be considered for funding, your application must include the SF424 submitted in grants.gov, as well as a proposal narrative and budget detail form submitted in Just Grants. Proposal narrative format. Your application must include a proposal narrative that follows all formatting and content requirements as detailed in the NOFO. The narrative should be double-spaced, use a standard 12-point font, have no less than 1-inch margins, not exceed 20 numbered pages, and be submitted as an attachment in Just Grants. If the proposal narrative fails to comply with these length-related restrictions, OVC may consider such noncompliance in peer review and in final decisions. Tables, charts, and graphs may be included in the proposal narrative and can be created in a legible font smaller than 12-point. These items will count toward the page limit. Proposal narrative sections. Your proposal narrative must include the 4 sections listed here and their merit review criteria. Your application will be evaluated for technical merit based on how your proposed project addresses the criteria. An additional 10% will be assessed through your budget and associated documentation. Proposal narrative, description of the need. In the first section of the proposal narrative, you will identify the issue or problem you wish to address with this project. Using supporting information and data, you will need to demonstrate the need's impact on the target population and how it relates to the purpose of the NOFO. Proposal narrative, project goals and objectives. In the second section of your proposal narrative, you will identify your project's goals and objectives and how these address the purpose of the NOFO. Proposal narrative, project design and implementation. The third section of your proposal narrative should be the project design and implementation section. Here you will detail the project activities that will help you meet your goals and objectives identified in Section 2. Proposal narrative, capabilities and competencies. The final section of your proposal narrative should detail your capabilities and competencies that you bring to successfully complete your proposed project. Budget and associated documentation, your budget detail form. Your application must include a detailed line item budget using the Just Grants budget detail form. You may propose a budget that is less than the anticipated award ceiling amount. The budget should be reasonable to conduct the proposed project and be within your capacity to manage. The budget detail form collects the individual costs under each cost category needed to implement your proposed project. Applicants should ensure the name or description of each cost is clear and provide the detailed calculation. For example, the cost per unit and number of units for the total cost. Applicants should enter additional narrative as needed to fully describe the cost calculations and connection to the project goals and objectives, including, if applicable, describing connections to OJP priority goals. Budget proposals should include the funding needed to implement the proposed activities. In preparing their budget proposals, applicants should consider what types of costs are allowable if awarded funding. Costs are allowable when they are reasonable, allocable to, and necessary for the performance of the project. Along with your budget detail form and Just Grants, your application may also require additional attachments. For those applicants with current federally approved indirect cost rates, you should upload it as an attachment in Just Grants. Additionally, if you propose a rate for a consultant on your project that is higher than the established maximum rate, then you will need to request approval before incurring costs at the higher rate. Additional application components. The applicant should attach the additional requested documentation listed below in Just Grants. Curriculum vitae or resumes, provided resumes of key personnel who will work on the proposed project, or a description of the experience and skills of key personnel necessary to implement the project. Tribal authorizing resolution, if applicable. An application in response to this NOFO may require inclusion of tribal authorizing documentation as an attachment. If applicable, the applicant will upload the tribal authorizing documentation as an attachment in Just Grants. Timeline. Provide a timeline listing key activities and milestones and the quarters during which they will take place. If applicable, you should also attach any supporting memoranda of understanding or letters of intent. Each MOU or LOI should include the following: names of the organizations involved in the agreement, what services and other work will be performed under the agreement and by what organization, and the duration of the agreement. Your budget must also include the SF-424, proposal narrative, and the budget detail form. In addition to these required elements, your application should also include many of the elements noted here. Please review the NOFO checklist carefully to identify which you should include. Use the checklist in your review prior to submitting your application. Responsiveness review. To meet the basic requirements to advance to peer review and receive consideration for funding, your application must be from an eligible applicant, not exceed the award ceiling, be responsive to the NOFO scope, and include the SF424, the proposal narrative, the budget detail form, including budget items, their calculations, and explanations. Remember, if you fail to submit any of the required documents, your application will not be considered for funding. Denitza, can I hand it to you now to go over the application submission process?
Thank you, Lindsay. We will now share a brief overview of the application submission process. Your entity must register with SAM.gov and obtain a unique entity identifier, and you must maintain an active SAM.gov registration status at all times. For entities new to SAM.gov, the registration process can take time, so start early at any point during the year to be sure your status reaches active before you need to submit a funding application. Renew your registration in SAM.gov every 12 months. Even if you've applied for a federal grant before, you need to check that your registration is current and renew it if it is not. Applicants who do not have an active SAM.gov status will not be able to complete step 1 of the application process in grants.gov. Also be sure that your organization's points of contact in SAM.gov, especially the Electronic Business Point of Contact or eBiz POC, are current. The eBiz POC may receive notices about time-sensitive actions they need to take during the application process. The process for submitting your application begins in grants.gov. Once you have located the funding opportunity in grants.gov, you must submit the SF424. This is the extent of the application requirement in grants.gov. Once your application has been submitted and validated in grants.gov, it will be sent to Just Grants for completion. It may take several days for grants.gov to complete validations and release it to Just Grants. You will complete the rest of the application in Just Grants. After the Just Grants deadline has passed, OVC will thoroughly review all applications. As a reminder, this process only applies to competitive NOFOs. Non-competitive NOFOs follow a different process. Application submission reminders. There are 2 application steps, each with their own deadline. You must submit the required documents by the grants.gov deadline of February 24th, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time to be considered. We encourage you to not wait until close of the deadline to submit your application. Please keep in mind, during the final step of submission, the Just Grants system will check your application for completeness. Unfortunately, we have had applicants fail to successfully submit their application because the NOFO deadline passed before this process was completed. Those that are completed after the deadline will not be considered for funding. You may enter preliminary information in grants.gov, even if you haven't fully determined your budget or project scope. You will be able to edit and update all of your entries in Just Grants. Once you have submitted the forms in grants.gov, you will submit the rest of your application in Just Grants. This deadline is March 3rd, 2026 by 8:59 p.m. Eastern Time. The Just Grant submission should include all items that are required in the NOFO. For technical assistance submitting your application in any of these platforms, please contact the appropriate help desks listed in the NOFO and at the end of this training. What happens after application submission? After the Just Grants deadline has passed, OVC will thoroughly review all applications. As a reminder, this process only applies to competitive NOFOs. Non-competitive NOFOs follow a different process. First, we check to confirm that the application contains the basic minimum requirements that were described in the funding opportunity. For applications that miss these requirements, you will receive notice that your application has been eliminated from further review. For competitive opportunities, peer reviewers who are subject matter experts assess the technical merits of an application. OVC staff then assess applications based on factors such as geographic diversity, past performance, and whether applications are likely to meet the funding opportunity goals and objectives. We then evaluate the fiscal integrity of the applicant, examine proposed costs, and determine whether the budget and budget narrative accurately explain the project's costs and whether those costs are allowable and reasonable. Finally, OVC reviews potential risks presented by applicants prior to making an award. This pre-award risk assessment takes into account a variety of factors, including an applicant's financial capability and past performance. During the review process, OVC may contact you to clarify program or budget details. Applicants are often eager to learn how their application is progressing through the review process. Unfortunately, DOJ staff, including user support and the OJP Response Center, cannot share any information with you until final awards have been made public. Award notices. If your application has been funded, specific Just Grants users for your organization will be notified by email and will see the award appear in their Just Grants account. If you receive notice of an award, you must take specific steps in Just Grants to accept or decline it. The DOJ Award Acceptance Checklist on the Just Grants Resources website can walk you through these steps. If you are not selected for funding, OJP will notify you by email after all award recipients have been notified. You can visit the OJP's Grant Awards website to see all OJP awards made by year, program, and locality. Future funding opportunities. Applications submitted under this FY 2025 funding opportunity may be funded in future fiscal years, including FY 2026, dependent on, among other considerations, the merit of the applications and the availability of appropriations. Lindsay is going to close us out with information on application resources.
Thank you so much. Yes, we have many resources available to help guide you through the application process. The Grants.gov Quick Start Guide. Grants.gov has a comprehensive Quick Start Guide to help you register for and apply to OVC awards. The guide includes sections on registering, roles, workspaces, completing forms, and submitting your application. Just Grants training resources. The Just Grants website has a collection of resources available for you to use. Training materials, including self-guided e-learning videos, supplemented by job aids, reference guides, checklists, and infographics. These resources will help you learn to navigate the system to complete various essential grants management tasks during the application process. Additional resources. The DOJ grant application submission checklist includes step-by-step instructions on preparing your OVC application. The Office of Justice Programs Grant Application Resource Guide provides guidance to assist OJP grant applicants in preparing and submitting applications for OJP funding. It addresses a variety of policies, statutes, and regulations that apply to many, or in some cases all, OJP program applicants, or to grants and cooperative agreements awarded in fiscal year 2025. Some OJP programs may have program NOFOs that expressly modify a provision of this guide. In such cases, the applicant is to follow the guidelines in the NOFO as to any such expressly modified provision. The DOJ Grants Financial Guide. The DOJ Grants Financial Guide is the primary reference manual to assist OJP, OVW, and COPS Office Award recipients and fulfilling their fiduciary responsibility to safeguard grant funds and ensure funds are used for the purposes for which they were awarded. Applicants will want to become familiar with the guide. It compiles a variety of laws, rules, and regulations that affect the financial and administrative management of your award. References to underlying laws and regulations have been provided in the guide as much as possible. The top 10 topics in the guide as listed here, and they include things such as financial management systems, allowable costs, unallowable costs, federal financial reports, among others. Information about OVC. Visit the OVC website to learn about OVC's history and funding, find multimedia products, and register for upcoming events. Application submission training. Today, we've given you a brief overview of how to apply for the OVC FY25 Integrated Services for Minor Victims of Human Trafficking program. For further detailed training on application submission, you can attend a live weekly training session, download detailed training slides, or watch a pre-recorded version of the training. Important contact information. Be sure to start your application in grants.gov and Just Grants as soon as possible to confirm you have access. If possible, submit your application well before the due date. OJP will only accept late applications if an applicant can demonstrate that there is a technical reason they could not submit. So you will want to ensure you have plenty of time to address any technical issues you may encounter. Just Grants can be reached by phone at 833-872-5175 or email to justgrantsupport@usdoj.gov. When contacting any of these system help desks, please be sure to request a tracking number so you can document that you sought assistance with your issue. This will be important in the event you need to document that you had a technical issue that prevented you from submitting your application. Finally, the OJP Response Center is available to answer questions about programmatic requirements of the NOFO. They can be reached by phone at 1-800-851-3420 or email to ojpresponsecenter@usdoj.gov. If you are a current grantee, we appreciate your understanding that your grant manager and other OVC staff cannot answer questions about an open NOFO directly. For purposes of fairness and transparency, if you reach out to us, we will have to refer you back to the OJP Response Center so that your question can be documented and addressed officially. Finally, please keep in mind that the OJP Response Center is also who you need to contact within 24 hours of the grants.gov or Just Grants NOFO deadlines should you experience any technical issues that prevented your application submission. Keep in mind you will need to be able to document any technical issues, which is why starting your application early and maintaining any tracking numbers if you have a reported issue is critical. If you need assistance when registering or working in SAM.gov or grants.gov, please contact their help desk directly. Thank you for your time and attention today. Serena, I'll hand it to you to close this out. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay and Denisa, for that thorough overview of this important funding opportunity. We hope you found the information presented here today helpful. If you're interested and eligible for this NOFO, here are the next steps to take. Access the NOFOs at grants.gov and ovc.ojp.gov. Register in grants.gov early, as this process can take several weeks. Review program-specific application deadlines and requirements. And of course, contact the OJP Response Center for assistance. For more information about the Office for Victims of Crime, please visit ovc.ojp.gov. Thank you for your time, and we hope to see you again.